After running this channel and my woodworking business out of this apartment garage for almost 5 years, I quit. I'm done. I've finally had enough. I need a change. It's time to leave all of this that I've built up behind me. But why? Well, my wife and I just bought our first house. That means we can finally move out of our apartment, which means moving out of this rental garage and into something bigger and better. But before I show you my new space, I want to talk about my issues and limitations with this current space. First, and probably the most important thing for a woodworker, this space only has one single 120 volt 15 amp outlet, and I don't have access to the breaker box, so I have no ability to upgrade the power or reset it if it trips. That means I can only run one tool at a time. I can't even run my table saw and dust collector at the same time, which gets messy. Want to charge your cordless tool batteries, turn on the lights, and run the planer? Nope, that'll blow the breaker. I have to be unbelievably careful about how much power I pull, or I will trip the main breaker that I don't have access to reset.
Oh, I love when this happens.
Now, one solution that I tried was running massive extension cords from my apartment across the parking lot and into the garage. While yes, that did work, here's a little secret that I've been holding from all of you. Well, I've actually never been allowed to run these tools in the apartment garage. It's kind of explicitly called out in the lease, so I don't want to blow my cover and get evicted. So what did I do? I bought one of these super expensive external battery banks, and does it work? Yeah, but it's a pretty expensive solution and likely out of the budget for a lot of folks facing the exact same issue as me. Now, that single 120 volt 15 amp outlet also means that I can't run larger tools like this bandsaw or this dust collector because they run off of 240 volt power, which here in the US needs a special plug.
What are those?
I got these too early, which is why they've been sitting in the background of videos for a while. And because of that, running a full-size planer or a full-size jointer is never going to happen unless I get access to 240 volt power, which is why I'm stuck with these crappy benchtop versions. Second, I have no options for climate control, which means it gets really hot and really cold. I can't keep the door open to get fresh air or a breeze because I have to operate all of this as a secret and never let anyone know that I was running tools in here because it was against the rules of the complex. Because this is an apartment garage, I can't put any holes in the exterior. I can't run a mini split to keep consistent temperatures because they would require me to drill holes in the exterior of my shop to run lines. Also, remember that electrical issue I told you about? Even if I did find a way to hide that air conditioner, it would use all the power I had and I couldn't run my tools, which kind of defeats the purpose. So during the summers, it would get around 100 degrees to upwards of 115 degrees in here. My only saving grace, this little fan. Now I had the complete opposite problem in the winter. I couldn't use any sort of electrical heater because of the circuit limitations. Can't run tools and a heater at the same time, right? Now, could I use a propane heater? Yes, but remember, I had to work in stealth here, which means I can't open the door, which means all of the propane exhaust would be trapped inside the garage. And eventually the oxygen would be all used up and I would suffocate. It's a really stupid way to die. And no, I am not using a kerosene heater because those smell terrible. Plus, with both kerosene and propane, I don't want a massive open flame around all of the wood, sawdust, and finishing products. So during the winters, it would get down below zero, leaving my body and my frail little fingers insanely cold. Ever tried doing precision work when your fingers are absolutely freezing? It sucks. Again, not the most enjoyable woodworking experience. And third, because this is a one-car garage, I am severely limited on the layout and tools that I can get in here. The limited space made it simply impossible for me to tackle some bigger projects that I've been dying to build, like a king-size bed, custom cabinetry, or very large dining tables. And since my workbench is my outfeed table, I would constantly have to move those projects to the floor if I ever wanted to use the table saw. Now, while it's true that all of those were major problems, that still never stopped me from getting out here and creating all the projects that I had in my head. But like I mentioned earlier, we just bought our very first house and we're moving out of this place, which means a brand new shop. So let's get things packed up and move on over to the new place. While I am getting things situated here, I have a story to share with you about how all of this happened in the first place. It all started back like 17 years ago when I was in high school. School came fairly easy to me, but I never really enjoyed any specific class. To fulfill some credit requirements, I was given the choice between taking a foreign language, which I wasn't interested in at the time, or taking woodshop. So me wanting to go towards what I thought would be the easiest thing, I signed up for woodshop and in just a few days fell in love with making things by hand. I look forward to doing that class every single day. The only problem was that at my school and in the community where I grew up, getting into the trades was highly looked down upon. So I just pushed down my passion for woodworking inside to pursue engineering in college, which I definitely didn't get much enjoyment out of. Flash forward to 2016 when I graduated college and got my first job. I was absolutely miserable and hated every single day of waking up and driving to that job. You might be able to relate. I found myself daydreaming and remembering back to those high school days where I'd be building stuff and remembered how much I absolutely loved it, but still didn't act on it. I didn't want to admit to anyone that I wasn't happy. About a year or two later, I found a different job which was slightly less miserable, but I still hated just about every single day of driving into the office. It was truly soul-crushing to work a job that didn't excite me whatsoever. Around that time, I moved into a new apartment and having no furniture or no money, I thought to myself, hey, I can probably build things cheaper than buying them. And if you know anything about woodworking, that's definitely not true. I started whipping together some cheap furniture for the apartment and was instantly sucked back into my passion, and I always found myself loving to watch videos here on YouTube from folks who taught me everything I know. I would work outside in the snow. I would sand projects and stain them in our living room. And I would even build things for my friends and family for free, which is a terrible idea, but that's another video. I was absolutely obsessed. About a year later, I decided I should give back to the community that taught me by making some videos and posting them here on YouTube. So I went on to put out a video week after week after week after week with virtually no one watching them. But for the first time in my adult life, I was having an absolute blast doing something, and it didn't even matter to me that I wasn't making money. I finally found my passion and what makes me excited. I would wheel all of my tools out in the parking lot of my apartment, working in the freezing cold or blistering heat every single day, and somehow never got a complaint from someone. One afternoon, I found out that a garage was available here in my complex, and I moved into the space, which is where I reside today. I went from a completely blank garage to a fully functioning workshop out of my apartment, something everyone told me was impossible. I built furniture for clients where I use 100% of profits to invest back into tools to make my life easier. I built shop projects to make me more organized and more efficient, and I got to the point where I had this place dialed into a well-oiled machine. So it's really weird to see this garage reverted back into its blank slate and walk away from all of this. But that also means we get to build out an entirely new shop and solve all of the issues I had with this one. Let's head over there now. Welcome to the new shop. There's all kinds of street maintenance, so let's close the door. Now, before we can do anything, you'll probably notice that the lighting in here is absolutely awful, especially if we're filming videos. So let's take care of that real quick.
Those two lights actually light the space fairly well, but not for the camera.
So now you'll actually be able to see what I'm doing, but let's get to work.
These two bulbs built into the garage door opener simply aren't enough light to woodwork, especially when I need to capture everything on camera for you to watch. So we need some lighting. Well, a lot of lighting. Did I mention that I now have an enclosed attic space too? Anyway, I hopped into the attic to rough in this box where I can feed in some connectors for the lights. This kind of work intimidates a lot of people, but after you get a light under your belt, it's an incredibly simple process to repeat. I also threw in a quick light switch over here, so let's see if that works. Cross your fingers. Boom! Nailed it. Now that that works, let's continue on. Because I am OCD and want everything to be perfectly straight, I'm utilizing my laser that automatically levels itself so I can get a straight line all the way across my ceiling. Then it's just a quick process of pre-drilling holes in the horribly installed drywall the original builders put in back in the late 90s, hammering in some drywall anchors, screwing in the clips, snapping the lights into place, then connecting the wires. These are not some incredible high-end lighting solution that costs several $1,000s. Far from it. These are the same LED lights I had in my previous shop that I bought from Amazon. There's a link in the description below if you want to check them out. These come out to around $7 per 4-foot bar, which is an incredible deal. The install process is super quick, and I'm just throwing a few of them up in the ceiling for now to give me enough lighting to move on to the rest of the renovation.
All right, let's see if they work. Woo! Okay, that's an instant improvement. All right, so now that I've got the lighting taken care of, let's turn our attention to something that's a little more important. In my old shop, without a doubt, the biggest issue that I had was I only had one single circuit that was located above my garage door opener. So now that I have access to the main breaker panel, I wanted a little bit of an upgrade. And when I say a little bit of an upgrade, I mean a huge upgrade. I got myself a sub panel explicitly for all the tools in the garage. So on just this wall alone, I've got 1, 2, 3 outlets for a 240 volt circuit, so I can plug in joiners, planers, whatever. They're not gonna all run at the same time. And on the other side of the garage, I've got another separate 240 volt circuit that has 1, 2, 3 240 volt outlets, as well as another dedicated 240 volt outlet just for my dust collector. And just to keep myself completely covered, I've added 2, 4, 6 outlets on a dedicated 20 amp, 120 volt circuit on this wall. And I did the exact same thing, adding 2, 4, 6 outlets that are on another dedicated 20 amp, 120 volt circuit. So yeah, I should be pretty good with power here. You truly have no idea how excited I am to finally have the power to run the tools that I've always wanted to use. But now we need to take care of something else that's super important and quite a big eyesore right now.
Now, there was some insulation thrown in the garage when I moved in, but it didn't make any sense that it was just in random parts and pieces. And while I wanted to have the renovation done before I moved, unfortunately, that didn't happen, so we had to hire a truck with a liftgate to move all of my tools over, but I can work around that for the time being. Because I had no clue what kind of insulation was haphazardly thrown in the garage before I moved in, I decided to start fresh and bring in all my own insulation. This truck is already paying for itself. Now, I am not throwing away the old insulation. Rather, I'm going to use it to supplement the insulation that I put up in the attic, so it's not going to go to waste. This stuff can be nasty, so make sure to wear gloves, mask, and glasses when handling it. I quickly learned that short sleeve shirts were a recipe for being constantly itchy. So with that pile of old insulation taken down, I can start breaking into the 30-foot rolls I bought, all 25 of them. Before I started with this, I had a major repair that all my patrons who get access to all the behind-the-scenes videos already know about. But then I could start insulating the cavities on the bottommost half of the walls before moving to above the garage door, just because I wanted to get all the small, tedious parts done first. I have never done insulation work in my life, but you can see how it starts to look better the further along the project that I go. As a beginner, I want to share some tips that helped me out a lot. I started by just kind of hacking away at the pieces that I need to cut with a razor blade. It worked, but it looked awful. I then found this method where you sandwich the insulation between two boards and using one as a straight edge, slide the razor blade along the edge. This gave incredibly clean cuts. Next tip, cut the pieces slightly longer than you think you need. You'd rather have it be long and push the extra insulation in than to have it be too short and have a gap. Third, when working by outlets, just make a small slit in the insulation to bridge both sides of the outlet. Lastly, wear long sleeves so you don't itch for days after working with this stuff. It wasn't incredibly difficult work, but when I got that last piece finally stapled in, boy, was I glad to be done. Is it perfect? No, but no one will ever see it because it's gonna all get covered up.
With just the insulation up, it already has made a dramatic difference. It's 34 degrees out and it's very comfortable inside the garage. But I want to do things to make it a little bit nicer.
While insulation will definitely help keep things comfortable, there's one thing that I've wanted for nearly 5 years, and that's climate control in my wood shop. And now I've got it. I installed this 18K BTU DIY ductless mini split from Mr. Cool, and it could not have been easier for someone like myself who has never done HVAC work. This is a complete do-it-yourself HVAC system that features quick connect fittings and pre-charged line sets, which means you can install the whole system yourself without the expensive cost of paying a professional, which I was quoted around $6,000. What's great about this Mr. Cool DIY ductless mini split is that it is a heat pump, which means during the summer I can cool the shop and during the winter I can heat the shop. Including filming the whole process, it only took me about 6 hours to get this unit all set up in my shop, and now I no longer have to wear winter coats during cold months and profusely sweat during the hot summer months. Huge shout out to Mr. Cool for sponsoring today's video, and pick up a system for your home today by visiting the link in the description below. Want to know something else that I've never done before? Drywall. So instead of doing a small repair, let's launch right into a massive project. What could possibly go wrong? I'm going to start from the bottom because that makes the most sense to me, but I know I want a small gap up from the concrete, so a few spacers will hold the sheet up, then I can slide it into the corner. And that's where I hit my first problem. I have to cut around outlets. Damn. I 3D printed this doohickey that slides over the outlet, and when I push the drywall, makes a dimple where I need to cut out. Then with another 3D printed jig, I could mark out the exterior of the outlet box, use a multi-tool to cut it out, and boom, outlet's accessible. No 3D printer, no worries. You can also do the old measure and mark trick to try to figure out what the outlet is, but that can be a little less accurate. Now all it's left to do is screw this into studs. But here's where drywall differs from normal woodworking. Instead of just hammering a screw home, you need to feather it in so it's just barely below the surface and not breaking through the paper of the drywall. Absolutely, this can be done with any old drill or impact driver, but in a room this big, that would take absolutely forever. So I've got a solution that's going to make this thing faster. I picked up one of these Festool DWC-18 cordless drywall drills, and you've got to see this thing. All that I have to do is push it into the wall, and it does everything for me. It sets every single screw at the perfect depth, and with screws on the collated strips, I don't fuss with each and every screw. Remember that huge gap I had around the first outlet? I can fix that. Clamp on a scrap of wood, attach it to the drywall, throw a drywall scrap in the void, screw that to the wood behind, installed. And yeah, I'll throw some mud in there later too, but we'll get that later. When it comes to cutting drywall, you can absolutely measure it, but I find it easier to hold the piece up where I need it and just visually mark the cut line. With a large square, I can mark the line and then go to town with the multi-tool to get the piece to the right size. When you do inevitably run out of screws in that strip, you pull the string out and insert another set of screws and you can breeze through hang-in drywall. That is, unless you're using 5/8 inch thick fire-rated drywall that weighs almost 100 pounds a sheet, you definitely need a hand lifting this stuff. Shout out to my wife for lending a helping hand. She didn't want to be on camera though. As you can see, I flew through hanging these sheets, and during that time, I discovered a much faster and cleaner way to cut drywall. You simply mark your line, follow it with a razor blade which scores a line. You can then snap the drywall panel to the line, then cut the paper on the back, and you're all set. This method is significantly easier and way less dusty. By no means do I think there are any specialty tool out there that is a must-have, but this DWC-18 from Festool certainly made the process a heck of a lot faster. Drywall is really weird. Unlike woodworking where even a 1/64th inch gap, that's like 1/3 of a millimeter for everybody outside the United States. And apparently Myanmar also uses the imperial system. But anyway, 1/64th of an inch gap wouldn't pass in furniture building. But in drywall, a gap over 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch gap really isn't that big a deal and something hard to get used to, but these gaps are fine. I mixed up some quick setting mud to pre-fill all those gaps between the panels of drywall before my mom and wife came out to help mud and tape all the seams around the shop. But this back wall that was drywalled before I moved in was an absolute nightmare. Whoever did the drywall work originally did such a bad job that I had to skim coat the entire wall in an attempt to smooth it out. But it was my first time, and it was far from perfect. While I could absolutely do this by hand, I went the faster and easier route. I picked up this Festool Plane X2, which is a massive 225mm or about 9-inch sander that was an absolute game changer. It has detachable extensions that make reaching high up places super easy, a 360-degree light that helps show surface imperfections, and when connected to the CT36AC dust extractor, which automatically cleans the filter from being clogged by the superfine drywall dust, makes my sandpaper last virtually forever, and after sanding the entire wall, this was the only dust left on the floor. Now that the back wall is close to being somewhat smooth, I have to work on mudding around the entire shop once again to really blend everything to make things closer to flat. Once that dries, I took the Plane X around the entire shop to get everything prepped. Now, have I done drywall the manual way with a pulse sander? No. But after using this Plane X and being able to sand the entire shop in about 25 minutes, I don't even want to think about trying the manual way. It was honestly one time I can say I enjoyed the sanding process, and even someone who has never done drywall in their life can get a dang good finish on a large project like this. Things looked really good here, but I'm really persnickety and a glutton for punishment, so I made myself do one more coat of mud. One final sanding to really dial in a perfectly smooth wall. Then it was time to prime all the drywall so it didn't suck up tons and tons of paint.
And after all that work, here's the new shop. Now there is still a ton more work that needs to be done, but at least now I'm at the point where I can start building things and creating more videos for all of you to watch. No, this is not the end of the video. I want to show you around, show you some of the things that I've done to the space, improvements that I've made, and things that I do want to work on in the future and get some of your thoughts and suggestions. The first thing is lights. You saw me add a couple earlier on in the renovation, but I actually went through, got all of the extra lights from my old shop, and bought more to really level things up. Now, a lighting setup like this is 100% overkill. You do not need this many lights to woodwork. But for me, and I'm producing all these videos, the more light I have, the easier it is for my camera to capture everything and the easier it makes it for you to see what I'm doing. And yeah, I do want to redo this ceiling, smooth out all the drywall that they did a terrible job putting in, mud it, paint it, make it look really nice, but for right now, I just need to get this space up and running so I can start building and making more videos for you guys. But yes, I do want to redo the ceiling. Second, and I know people are absolutely going to crucify me in the comments if I don't address this, yes, I did fully insulate the entire ceiling and attic space above me to make sure that there is no thermal loss through the ceiling. There are no lights up there, it's completely pitch black, so filming up there was gonna be really, really challenging. And third, now that I have access to 240 volt power through that sub panel, I rewired this table saw from 120 volts to 240 volts. The reason for doing this is 1, to lower the amperage draw on my sub panel. 2, the table saw will just run a little bit more efficiently on 240 volts. And 3, on 240 volts, this motor will start up a little bit faster, but definitely something you don't need to do per se. And fourth, after months and months of having this dust collector hang out in the background of my videos, I can finally turn this thing on now that I have that 240 volt power. Now right now I'm currently in the middle of piping out this entire system. And instead of spending thousands and thousands of dollars on custom metal ducting, I'm actually 3D printing my own ducting system and saving a ton of money. I am not done, but right now this whole setup that I have here costs me maybe $75 to print. And if I would have got this amount in metal ductwork, this easily would have been close to $1,000 already. Fifth, it is currently 19 degrees outside and I am incredibly comfortable in this space wearing just a short sleeve t-shirt. And that's thanks to all the insulation work that I did on the walls, ceiling, combined with having this mini split in here now. It is currently running on full blast and you can't hear it at all. This is such a game changer to have in my shop. Sixth, I finally got this new bandsaw all wired up and ready to start cutting, which means that I am no longer going to be limited to the tiny capacity of this little bandsaw that I've had for years. The game plan is to keep this larger bandsaw set up permanently with a much bigger resaw blade, and then keep this smaller bandsaw over here set up with a much thinner blade that's going to be perfect for doing a lot of small, intricate curve cuts. You also might have noticed that I picked up one of these lowered mobile workbenches for my benchtop jointer. This puts it at a much more practical working height for me and doesn't make it so I have to either work on the ground or work really high up when it's on a bench. But truth be told, this jointer has not really worked out for me very well. It's not impressed me. I don't think it's worth the money. So I've been eyeing a bigger upgrade now that I have that 240 volt power, but we're not there quite yet. And seventh, you've probably noticed that it is a little bit echoey in here right now. Now this is not a big deal for woodworking, but for me creating these videos, I need to work on something that's going to cut that down and make it a lot easier and more pleasant for you all to hear me. So my plan is to add some sound deadening panels on the ceiling, on the walls, and in the corners to really cut down on all those audio waves bouncing off everything. It is never going to be a recording studio by any means, but hopefully it should help improve some things. Eighth, I added this lumber storage system up above the garage door for easy access to whatever I need. Previously, I had to climb up into the rafters and get the wood out from there, and it was definitely not easier. This is much easier access, and I can actually see everything that I have in stock. Lastly, I got this temporary miter saw station set up, and while it's working great, it definitely is not the most efficient use of all the space that I have here. I'm planning on building out a massive miter saw station, complete with cabinets, an embedded stop block system for getting repeatable measurements, dust collection, the whole 9 yards. I want to have cabinets below the miter saw, and then also have cabinets above the miter saw that I'm going to take all the way up to the ceiling to really maximize the storage in an otherwise dead and useless location. If you have any ideas or suggestions on how I could make this miter saw station better, or the space in general, leave them down in the comments and I'll see you on the next video.